Hey everyone, hope you're having a good day. Last December, I told you, those of you who were with me then, about an event that happened on the 23rd of December, which is my oldest brother's birthday. And this happened obviously 2 days before Christmas. I did not know, but my brother told his wife he had a rental house that wasn't rented, and he went over there a lot and worked on it. And on the 23rd of December, he was 79. So he left to go work on the house, and my sister-in-law called me on the 25th in the morning, on Christmas morning, and told me that, and she'd never, I'm recapping all of this. I did report about this in episode 32, 33, and 34, if you want to go back and look at those. But anyway, she called me on the 25th and told me that my brother had left and that he did not come home. And so she was very worried all day, and when it started getting later, dinner time, and he wasn't home. And she kept thinking he was going to walk in the door, and he didn't. So about 11 o'clock that night, she called him, and he answered his phone. And he said, she said, "Steve, where are you?" And he said, "I'm heading north." She's like, "You're heading north? Where are you?" And she seemed to be telling her that he was on the coastline. They live in California, that's where I'm from. And she thought that he was in an area called Leucadia, and he was heading north on the 101 highway. And so fast forward 2 days, and she calls me on the 25th on Christmas morning and tells me that he was missing and that she'd reported him missing, and she was very worried and she didn't know what happened. So of course she never ever called me ever before. So as soon as that I saw that she was calling me, I knew that there had to be something wrong with my brother. So that's the way I answered the phone. So she starts talking, and I said, what's wrong? What happened to Steve, right? And so there was a big search and nobody knew what to do. And of course, I'm in Ohio. That's way too far away. And so my wonderful daughter is calling hospitals and searching for things and trying to be of help on my behalf. And which I was very grateful for, because I didn't really know. I couldn't think of anything to do, right? So so it ended up that my sister-in-law had called a very old friend of his, and I mean, they went to elementary school together, and the same elementary school that I went to when I got to be school age. And his name was Mike, and he started calling hospitals to see if anybody had admitted my brother to a hospital, which we'd been, my older daughter had been doing that too, but we were looking on the coast, and this guy Mike decided to look inland, and he ended up finding that my brother was at in Escondido at a place called Palomar Hospital. And he had some serious head injuries, and no one knew what happened. So the story of how he got there was still very nebulous, and it is still, but there wasn't a piece of evidence. So my brother didn't have his glasses with him. He did not have a fanny pack that he usually wore, but he did, I think, have his wallet. Maybe that was in the fanny pack. Anyway, he had arrived by ambulance, so we didn't know what that was about. So he was in the hospital from, I think, the 23rd, or probably early morning on the 24th, and he was there until the 30th, and he wasn't conscious enough. He could say a word or two. He knew my sister-in-law's name, and there was something else that he said, but he just wasn't in any shape to be questioned. I had a phone conference with the doctor and my sister-in-law. She kindly looped me in on that, and the doctor said that he had severe head injuries. He had 2 cracks in his skull, and bruising on his face, and the upshot of that conversation was that he did not give my brother very much chance of surviving, like high-end 30%. But if you knew my brother and my family, I at that point was still hopeful that he would survive. But then they had him in the intensive care unit, and my sister-in-law texted me and said, "Yay, they're transferring out of intensive care, so he's fighting." And we all thought, well, that was a good sign, right? Well, no one said this, but my guess is that the hospital needed the bed, and they did not think he was going to survive, so they moved him to a hospital room and told my sister-in-law to call hospice. So by the 30th of December, they moved him on the 29th and then into a room, and on the 30th, my sister-in-law called me and said that he was on a morphine drip, and I thought, oh no. When they put you on a morphine drip, that's just to keep you comfortable while you die, right? I'm a nursing assistant. I've seen lots of people, been around the scene of, people passing and being in hospitals and hospice and all those things. And so I know that the morphine drip is a hospice thing, and that's what they consider to be comfort care, which it is. And my brother did die that day at about 8 o'clock in the evening. So the end of the story is, because we still did not know what happened, I thought, so my brother had gone over to the house that day to do a repair on the roof. And again, if you knew my family, you'd know that, like, we're can-do. Our parents taught us to be can-do and do things ourselves, and you don't ask if you can do it, you ask how can I do it, right? And actually, I don't think they ever told us that, but they did that. And so that's the way. I have had 2 older brothers, they're both gone now, and myself, and so we just learned that as we grew up. So he went over there to put a tarp on top of the roof because it was going to be raining. And so my theory was that the head injuries happened because he went up on the roof and was wrestling with the tarp, and it was windy, there was a storm coming, and he fell off the roof. He did tell me right before that when last time I spoke with him, that he also had he was a cancer survivor, and he'd been on a cancer drug called Erivedge, Erivedge, for quite a few years, and he kept losing weight, and which happens with cancer patients, and but he struggled on, even though it changed and everything tasted bad, and but he was like right there. He was going to survive it. He was going to get through. And then after a few years of that, maybe 4 or 5 years even, he went and he always had scans done and testing, and he had tumors in his lungs. And while the Araveg had been stopping the tumors from growing, then all of a sudden it wasn't stopping them and they were starting to grow. So so the doctor said, well, there's not any other drug that we know of except there is Keytruda, and that one is sort of an immune booster, a builder, and maybe we can try that. And so my brother said, okay, let's try that. So he went every, I think, 6 weeks for an infusion, and he told me that the tumors had dissolved. Now, what he didn't say was that he was cured. I assumed that, well, he was certainly cured of the tumors, but what he didn't say was that the Keytruda was simply holding the cancer back. So fast forward a year and a half, almost 2 years later, he's still on the Keytruda, and he's going and having blood tests, and they say, oh, now you're losing white blood cells. It looks like you may have leukemia. Well, I looked it up, and a side effect of Keytruda is, you guessed it, leukemia. I don't even know if he told his wife this. I suspect not. And he had an appointment to go talk with some doctors about having a bone marrow transplant at 79. And I don't know if he did that and what the result of that was. But the bottom line is that he had this, what I think was an accident. And I think what happened was that he went up on the roof and was tussling with the tarp, and he fell off, because it's easy to do. If you've ever been up on a roof, you know how easy it is to fall off of one. And that's why I don't go on roofs and won't ever. I promised my kids. So he fell off the roof is what I thought happened, but I didn't have any confirmation of that. And then I think that he was unconscious, and I think he woke up and decided that he needed to go to the hospital. But being him and not realizing how severely he was injured, he decided to drive himself. And he ended up in a parking lot on the other side, like miles from his house. Apparently in a strip mall or something, and he parked the car, and he got out of the car, and I guess he was like stumbling around and obviously was not well. And some lady, the doctor thought, maybe he didn't know, maybe he just said lady, called an ambulance. And so he ended up at the hospital where my mom had been, where my mom passed, and where my brother had spent every day for 6 weeks or 2 months or however long it was that she was in the hospital, going to see her. And then they transferred him to another hospital, which there's Pomerado Hospital where he was, and then they transferred him to Palomar Hospital, and those two hospitals are linked, so patients can go back and forth there. So my theory is that he was very close to Pomerado Hospital, within a mile or two, and so I think that he did not tell my sister-in-law that he was injured because he didn't want her to worry, because he took care of her and he took care of everything, and so it would have been completely within his character to think, oh, he said, when my sister-in-law talked to him at 11 o'clock, he said, I'll be home. And she said, well, when are you going to be home? And he said, I'll be home in 2 hours. So we're like, 2 hours? What does that mean? Okay, so what I think is that in his head, his confused head, because he was seriously injured, he decided to go to that hospital because he knew where it was, and he didn't have to have directions, and his glasses were gone. So we knew that because they weren't at the hospital, but we didn't know what happened. So that's my theory. We'll never know exactly, but he ended up at Pomerado Hospital, which is where my mother was. So I think that that's probably true. Now, then there was the mystery of the glasses. So where were his glasses? Because, and how did he drive? I mean, I don't know what his vision was like. Obviously, well enough to drive almost to Pomerado Hospital, but that must have been a little difficult. And also, you know, two cracks in the skull. So he gets to Pomerado Hospital and tells them what his name is. And they then transfer him to Palomar Hospital, where he ended up dying. And then we still didn't know where the car was. And my daughter said, tell his wife to call the police department where she made the report that he was missing and ask them to find the car. They've got camera information and, you know, traffic information, and they can find it. Well, that day she did that, and that day they found the car, which was in the strip mall, which is all very strange. So my brother passes, and then the doctor said that his injuries were consistent with a fall, but because he hadn't, because it was a mysterious injury, the medical examiner, the coroner, would not let him be cremated or buried, and they took his body to do an autopsy to see what had happened. Now, I didn't ask her because she's my sister-in-law, because she's still really upset, but I will find out at some point what the coroner said. But obviously they said, okay, we have the information we need, and as far as I know, there's not any more of an investigation. So apparently the coroner agreed with the doctor that it was consistent with a fall. So that was, he died December the 30th. And last week, they released his body, and or a week or two, and so that's a month, about a month, at least a month. And I got a message from my sister-in-law with a photograph, and they had his ashes, and they'd had a service, and I wasn't going to go out. If he was alive, I would have gone out to see him, but I don't see any point in going out when he's not there anymore, and there's not really any other family, you know. So anyway, I said I'll be out in the spring, you know, when the weather's better, and you know, when whatever. So then the other thing is that she told me was that she has a neighbor. My brother had a neighbor. He has a dog there who protects the property, and so he needs to be taken care of. And my brother died without a will or a trust. And so now all their property and assets and everything are going to be in probate until, and for probably a year or so. Now, fortunately, he did just give her access to his bank account just a few months before that. So at least she has that money available to her. So that's good, because she's going to be in a real crunch financially until this all gets resolved. But anyway, she did tell me, the other thing she told me in that message was that the caretaker, who's a neighbor, his name is Corky, found my brother's glasses in the weeds next to the house. So yes, I'm sure that's what happened, because if his glasses had just fallen off, he could have climbed down and retrieved them, but obviously he didn't know where they were and couldn't find them in the dark. And so that's enough of the story for me to understand that probably my theory about what was going on with him, what happened and how he arrived with the injuries seems to be been confirmed. That seems very likely. So that's the end of the story. He is gone. She's not going to bury his ashes. She's got them in a beautiful white alabaster container, and her plan is to, when she dies, she'll be cremated, and they have burial plots right next to my mom, and they can both be, their ashes could be put in right next to each other in a plot. So that's the end of that story. I'm sorry, it's a sad one, but I did say that I would let everybody know if the police did an investigation or we had any idea of what happened, which is why I haven't made any other videos, because it was still really up in the air. So now we have completion, and we understand probably at least part of that story is correct, that he fell off the roof. So thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, it's very helpful to my channel. And I will be seeing you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and may God bless you and keep you. Bye-bye till next time.